Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting little timepiece here. This is the Omega Seamaster 300. Not the Seamaster 300 Professional, not the Seamaster Planet Ocean, not the Seamaster Aquaterra, just the Seamaster 300. So first off, though, I want to sincerely thank my buddy Jim for loaning me this guy from his personal collection. That's really kind of you, Jim. So I actually got a chance to wear this guy and spend some time with it, which is really great, because actually, when I bought my current watch, which is this guy, the Omega Planet Ocean, this was the other competition. This was the other one I was thinking about doing. And so very seldom in life do you actually get a chance to, see what might have been. And in this case, I have gotten that chance. And that's just spectacular. So thank you very much for that, Jim. Next thing, let's do a quick little size comparison here. Here it is, actually, against said Planet Ocean. And so you can see here that the 300 is around the same size in terms of the face of it, but substantially smaller in this vertical dimension here. Or I guess that's thickness. Well, I guess it's vertical off the wrist, right? Here it is against the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra here. And this is an older model, a quartz model, but still, you get a sense of the overall size. So this isn't a tiny watch, but it's also not Planet Ocean huge. And then here it is against some other commonly known watches, maybe a little lower in the price scale. Here it is against the Casio F91W right here, as well as the Casio F108. So you can see, again, not huge. And then, let's see here, a standard American quarter. So that gives you a sense of things. Then actually, let's throw some measurements on here as well. Go ahead and do things in centimeters, because that's how things are done in the watch world. But we're looking at right about 40 millimeters across the dial itself. Across the entirety of the watch. About 30 millimeter dial. And then once we include the crown, we're closer to 44 or something like that. Lug width, in terms of putting a bracelet on there, looks to be about 21, which, given Omega, their proclivity for crappy lug widths, yeah, that sounds about right. And then the lug-to-lug distance here, which can be really important for wearability, is coming in here around 47 millimeters, which isn't bad, really, particularly at all. So those are your measurements. Oh, and of course, on this dimension here, we are coming in right around, including the crystal, about 15, but that's also including everything on here. It wears substantially thinner than that. So anyways, there you go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little wristwatch here. So first off, on the good side, this has a great movement in it. This is Omega's Master Coaxial movement. What that means is that it is using the Daniels coaxial escapement, which we can actually see running if we pop this open here. Yeah, right inside there. Right there you can see a balance wheel going, but it's using a coaxial movement. It's slightly different than the conventional Swiss lever escapement, and that gives it some advantages in terms of accuracy and the characteristics of wear over time. Is it going to make a big difference for you on the wrist? Probably not. Maybe a little accuracy, but what is going to be more important is the master component of it, which is that this is a very anti-magnetic movement here. It says right there, anti-magnetic. Basically, up to the level of a small MRI machine, magnetism is not going to affect this watch because the relevant parts have been made from non-magnetic materials. The movement has some other nice characteristics too. It's got a nice power reserve, about what you'd expect from things. It has an independent hour hand, which means that if I pull out the crown to the very first position here, come on, pull on out there, crown. There we go. What I can do, you see the second hand is still running, but I can go ahead and adjust the hour 1 hour at a time. So if I get on a plane and fly 2 hours backwards in terms of time zones, I can do that very quickly without losing the accuracy of my seconds and minute hand. And it's also very, very quick. And that's great. I think that's one of the best complications in terms of actual utility that modern watchmakers are including in their watches, and so I like seeing it there. It is also an automatic watch, as you can tell by the fact that it's got the weight in there that is spinning around as I move the watch. That winds the watch as you're wearing it, which is great. And the winding feeling on it is actually very, very nice, which is nice. So there you go. Next thing, as I've just been showing off here, this does have a sapphire case back. That is a nice thing, especially given the figuring of this movement here. I mean, it's kind of hard to show off with a bracelet on there, but this movement is actually very attractively done. They've done a nice job making this movement pretty. And I like that a lot. I think it's a great little detail, and it's something that Omega offers over, for instance, Rolex, who, takes very nice movements and hides them away under case backs and things like that. So that's good. Next thing, this has a nicely domed crystal here. I'll see if I can show this off in this way. But you can see here that the crystal just has a nice little slope right off of the bezel thing. Right now, there is this kind of lump of crystal thing going on right now as a trend. I think it's a callback to vintage, but where you get like a big old, ingot of crystal sitting on top of the freaking watch. And honestly, I'm really happy that Omega hasn't done that here. Because it means that the crystal is not going to be vulnerable to sideways hits. And frankly, it's an attractive and it's a very low-key sort of feeling. I like that very, very much. So that's good. Next thing, this has a bunch of water resistance. This has enough water resistance, as a matter of fact, for pretty much everybody in the world. You can see here 300 meters or 1,000 feet. Look, that is, by the time you reach the water resistance limits of this watch, you were either dead or a technical diver. And either way, this watch probably isn't the watch you want to be wearing. Well, frankly, if you're dead, you don't really care what watch you're wearing because, well, you're dead. But nonetheless, this is absolutely enough water resistance for everybody doing pretty much everything that most people would ever do. So that's good. Next thing, this has a very nice diver's bezel here. It is unidirectional, so you can't turn it backwards, but it has a nice, satisfying clicky to it there. It has all kinds of different, this is a nice little bezel. There's no complaining about it there. The hour and minute hands on this guy are also very nice. You can see they've got a nice little bit of polish to them. If I kind of rotate this, you can see the light glinting off of those hour and minute hands, which is very nice. Makes them a little bit more legible in low light. The bracelet on this guy is nice as well, although a little bit dirty here. Let me clean that off a little bit. It's life with polished end links, but still, you can see very nicely the bracelet works, and it's got plenty of flex to it. It feels very nice on the hand. You can see he's using screw-down links on this guy, so you can actually remove these guys with screwdrivers, which is very nice, and it does have the Omega adjustable clasp. So what that means, see this little push button? If I push this button, watch, it actually extends the bracelet by a little bit or retracts it by a little bit, which means that you can basically get a link and change worth of adjustment for absolute free with zero tools just by loosening the strap and then and I can do this with the watch on my wrist at this point, which is very nice because you don't have to have it take it off. It's just like, it makes life very, very nice. And so I appreciate very much the quick adjust on there. It's something that now that I've had it on the Planet Ocean, I really struggle to go back to other bracelets. Then finally, on the good side, this is using an interesting styling. It's sort of vintage inspired. It's not like directly vintage in the same sense that some of Omega's stuff is, but it is very, very nice. And it shows a little bit of, I don't know, it's different. It calls back to a time when, the watches were maybe a little bit less crass. Look at me, that kind of thing. A throwback to when watches were a little less huge and flashy. So that vintage styling is going to do it for a lot of people. And so, absolutely, that's a good thing. So, to me, that's all is the good. Vintage-inspired styling, a great bracelet, great hour and minute hands, a great bezel, enough water resistance for pretty much everybody, a nicely domed crystal, a sapphire case back, and a very, very nice movement. Let's talk about what's great about this watch. To me, what is absolutely great about this watch is that it is pretty restrained as far as high-end dive watches go. High-end dive watches tend to do a bunch of unnecessary stuff just to keep up the pretense that they are divers. For instance, they will tend to have things like a helium escape valve, which if you are a saturation diver helps to prevent the crystal from popping out due to helium accumulation. Thing is, you are not a saturation diver, so you don't need it. And it turns out to be just unnecessary and unpleasant. Similarly, there's no dive extension here. Instead, they've opted to make the bracelet just a little bit smaller, which I will take any day of the week. The size of it is pretty manageable compared to a lot of your modern high-end hugey freaking divers, especially compared to the Planet Ocean here. That's great. They've stuck to 300-meter water resistance, which is just fine for everybody. Seriously. What they've done basically is they've created here a dive watch using things like the diver's bezel, which is a really nice thing. Even if you're not a diver, being able to time something pretty precisely with a bezel, whether it's a flight, whether it's the amount of time until your pizza gets here, whatever, is something that I very much appreciate. And so having the bezel is very nice, but they've created a dive watch here which you don't need to be a diver and which, more importantly, doesn't have things on here that make the watch more expensive or more large that I don't actually need as a non-diver. And so, to me at least, that's what's absolutely great about this, is that this is a dive watch in design, in style, but it doesn't have the affordances, the overperformance associated with a lot of modern dive watches. So to me, that's what's great here, is that it is restrained for a high-end diver. Let's talk about what's bad here. On the bad side to me, the accuracy on this guy isn't honestly that stellar. I'm getting around 4 seconds a day. And mind you, that does get a little bit better when you're wearing it constantly. So in periods where I've been wearing it 24/7, it gets a little bit, but that's not great either. This is around the stated specs. They say -2 +4. And maybe the watch will settle in a little bit more with a little bit more wear. My buddy hasn't worn it much, and I, only wore it for a couple of weeks here. But man, I gotta say, for the price, that's not super impressive. If you're gonna sell me a watch for $6,000, then by God, you better make it obscenely accurate. And so that's not thrilling me there. Next thing, this has no date window. I mean, that's pretty apparent just looking at it. Unless it happens to be the 12th, the 3rd, the 6th, or the 9th, you're not going to get a date on the dial here. And the thing is, this is a double-edged sword, actually. I mean, at some level, not having the date window is very nice, because if the watch stops, you take it off for a couple of days, you put it back on, all you need to do is just get the hands into the rough place. It doesn't matter whether you're, night or morning, because there's no date wheel. You don't have to reset the date. That's nice, but at the same time, it was something I found myself regularly frustrated by. Look down at my watch for the date and just like, oh, that's right. And so that was not something that I enjoy, but, could be a pro for some folks. Next thing, this has polished everything. I mean, seriously, this surface here is polished. This surface here is polished. This surface here is polished. Every one of the center links that are currently picking up fingerprints is polished. The sides of the freaking bracelet are polished. Holy crap, is there a lot of polishing on this watch. What this means is that it just overall means that this thing is just going to scratch up like crazy. Anytime anything touches this, it's going to put fingerprints on it. It's going to put oil on it. It's going to put scratches on it. This is going to show a lot more wear and a lot more just gunk than a non-polished bracelet like on your Planet Ocean here, than a brushed bracelet. And so that's not something I actually appreciate. In general, polished mid-links, although they offer a nice effect, are something that just they don't age so well, and so that's not something I appreciate. You might like it, but yeah. I mean, of course, you can have those brushed out relatively cheaply at your local jeweler, but you may be removing some value from your watch there. Next thing, I gotta say, the white secondhand isn't doing it for me really at all, especially when this watch has a tendency to go illegible. As you can see here, when I'm reflecting the phone I'm filming this on, the hour and minute hands you struggle a little bit to see those, but the second hand is just like boom, right there. I don't get it. There's nothing else white on this watch. Why do they have the second hand white as well? That just struck me as very, very odd. Next thing, the bracelet screws are not only held in by some sort of a strong thread locker, but they are actually relatively soft, which is not something I appreciate. It means that you're probably going to want to use some heat to disengage this, and even then, you're going to see little signs of deformation from using a driver to pop this guy open. Your jeweler should be taking care of that, and so they should, if they screw it up, then it's kind of on them. But still, that's not something I appreciate very much about this guy. If you're going to do screw-down links, then damn it, you need to have your screws be sufficiently hard, so you don't see that kind of issue. And then finally on the bad side, the lume on this guy, the luminous compound that makes this guy glow in the dark is okay. It's not terrible. I'm going to charge it off screen with a flashlight here so we can take a closer look. It's not terrible. You can see here that the hands, as well as each of the indices, are well loomed, along with a pip in the dial there. But at the same time, it's not super impressive compared to some other watches. Compared to the Planet Ocean, for instance, the lume honestly isn't all that great. Compared to any of the Seiko divers, the lume honestly isn't all that great. And by the way, the bicolorness, although that's pretty, goes away pretty quickly. You won't be able to see that very long. And so, although you can wake up and see this in the middle, it's a little bit more of a strain to read than, for instance, the Planet Ocean. And you can also see that it's actually a little bit harder to read just because you have the hour hand and there's nothing attached to it there. And so I didn't love the lume on this guy. I am a lume snob, and although it's okay, it's really forgotten its heritage as a dive watch by using relatively poor lume on there. Well, actually, I'm sure the chemical's fine. They just didn't use enough of it. So anyways, to me, that's what's bad here, is that the lume is fine, but not great. Screws are a little bit soft in the bracelet. The white second hand just doesn't really jive with the rest of it there. Everything is polished, which means everything will scratch and take fingerprints. There is no date on this guy, and the accuracy honestly isn't all that impressive out of the box for this. Hopefully it'll wear in. I'm sure it could be regulated, but come on, guys, that's your job. Let's jump into the ugly. Okay, there are two ugly issues here. First off, honestly, the dial doesn't impress me that much because it is just matte plastic. It is a painted sort of what looks to be polymer surface. Maybe it's some crazy ceramic that they'll tell you all about in the manual, but practically speaking, it just looks like paint applied to some kind of a matte plastic. There are two levels of depth. There is one level, and then there's the indices are kind of sunken a little bit down in there, but there's absolutely nothing applied. It's not like, for instance, on the planet Ocean, where you can see the Omega, both the name and the symbol, are separate pieces of metal. The indices are laying on there. Even the numbers are actually pieces of metal that are laid onto there, whereas on this guy, everything is just paint. It's well painted, certainly, but honestly, it bothers me a little bit. I mean, at some level, aesthetically, this is a $5,000 watch. Plus, you are not allowed to make anything look and feel cheap. I mean, Omega could have, coupled this with very subtle polished touches. Just one or two little applied details could have made this a beautiful thing. Heck, even just put the little silver surrounds around, or they just could have used a more interesting material. Omega has wonderful dial materials out there. They just didn't use it here. And functionally speaking, this is actually a little bit of an issue too, because reflective indices are better in low light. I mean, for instance, on a watch like this, the Seamaster Aquaterra, what you can see here is that as you move the watch around, the indices catch the light in various ways and make them effectively sparkle. And so even if you're in a low situation, if you angle the watch, low light that is, if you angle the watch right, you can usually see the indices and the hands just by them reflecting whatever light's there. Whereas on this guy, if the light is low, well, okay, at that point the Lume kicked in, as I just charged it, but if the light is low, all you can really see are the hands, and even still, it's not super impressive. And then also, because the dial is relatively unimpressive, the Lume it's applied very thinly. I mean, I would be more forgiving of this thing, particularly the sort of drop down to the Lume area, if the Lume was just like, oh my god, good. So you didn't have to worry about not being able to see the indices in dim conditions, but they skimped there too. And so honestly, maybe I'm nitpicking here, but to me, the dial is the least impressive thing for me. This is a really high-end watch with a dial that just feels decidedly kind of, okay, I guess. And that was ultimately what kind of made the decision for me, that and the date, and what made me go to the Planet Ocean, which has a much more interesting and, frankly, a much more high-end feeling sort of dial. The other issue for this guy that I consider to be ugly is that Omegas just lose a ton of value at purchase because they are just very overpriced. You would pay $6,600 at retail price for this, but on the secondary market, if you turn around and try and sell it, you walk out of the retailer and walk into, or well, go onto a forum, you will pay closer to $4,000 to buy one of these guys secondary. So the thing is, if you buy retail, you are basically paying $2,600 to walk out the door wearing this watch. This is a good reason why you shouldn't pay retail. Go to an authorized distributor, and AD will help you out on price a little bit. I mean, people will help you there, but the thing is, this is the universe's way of saying that the pricing is just too damn high, that they need to lower the cost to ADs to give them a little bit more flex on pricing, because right now it really feels like Omega's kind of trying to run their authorized distributors out of business and shift all their sales to the gray market. And, you know, the thing is, you read all these articles, oh, Swiss watch brands are hurting, oh my God, is it the end for Switzerland? No, the watch having a retail price of $6,600 is why that is the case. If they're not willing to drop the price outright, which I can understand, maybe they don't want to offend existing owners who paid the high price, if they can't drop it, I just don't want to hear any discussion of price increases for at least 5 or 10 years. This is just too expensive. They are taking a watch with a plastic dial and no date feature, and they're charging huge amounts of freaking money for it. And so that bothers me. And so, in short, I think Omega's pricing team is on some variety of crazy pills or another, and unfortunately, that affects the resale value and a whole bunch of other things. So, to me, those are the ugly things, is that the price is, well, just too damn high, and that the dial, to me at least, feels kind of lazy and underdone on a watch that is otherwise spectacularly done. Let's talk about the final conclusions here. Okay, final conclusion. This is a watch that is very, very nice, but I want to be very, very clear. You don't need this watch. If you are watching this and you are not a high-end watch person, don't come away from this review or any of other my watch reviews and say, oh my God, I need to pick one of these guys up. This is the pinnacle of watchdom. Because practically speaking, no, it's not. I mean, it's less accurate than a quartz watch that you would get out of a Happy Meal. There are other watches that have very, very nice finishing as well for a much smaller proportion portion of the price. And I mean, functionally speaking, this guy is offering relatively little that is new or different. The quick adjust is a very nice thing, but you can get that on other models from other companies. And, you know, the coaxial movement with the anti-magnetism is great. But again, you can get that in a quartz. So, I mean, functionally speaking, this is not like, oh my God, you need this watch. It is jewelry. You buy this because you want something pretty and excessive. That's the case with any high-end watch. And don't let any marketer tell you otherwise. This is something you get because you want it and because you are able to afford to do it. But you do not need this or any other high-end piece to have a good watch. Rant aside there. This is very, very nice jewelry, this guy specifically. It has a very nice movement that looks beautiful and runs very, very nicely as well, with nice characteristics in terms of durability, anti-magnetism, and accuracy. It also has an excellent bracelet with this quick adjust thing that is absolutely mind-blowingly good. I like that so much, and it shows some restraint, which is a beautiful freaking thing. More companies need to do that right now in terms of size and in terms of just like dial it back a notch here, guys. But it does have some downsides. I miss the date function absolutely 100%. I miss the crazy lume of a real dive watch. It's a little too polished. This is going to drive you a little bit crazy in all likelihood. And the dial, unfortunately, feels a little under-polished. There's just not enough going on here. For the price point, I'm just not super impressed by it. And there are, of course, lots of good alternatives. The Rolex Sub comes to mind, but it's bigger, more stereotypical, way more expensive. Or the Seamaster Professional 300. It doesn't have the Master Coaxial movement. It's a little less readable, but it is less pricey and has a much nicer dial. There's the Tudor Black Bay Black, which is half the price. Feels maybe a little more modern, a little more finished, but it is super tall in this dimension, and it's got a bracelet that just can't compete. Of course, there's Oris, the Diver 65, which gives you a nice taste of that vintage flavoring, but a much nicer size and price, but it doesn't have a chronometer movement. You don't get certification that it's going to be accurate worth a damn. And, but it is, like I said, less than half the price. Of course, the Citizen Signature Diver. Quartz movement, more accurate, more durable, longer power reserve on the order of years. 90% of the finishing for 10% of the price. But it's bigger, with a worse bracelet, and it's not exactly an heirloom quality piece. And of course, there is the Seamaster Planet Ocean, which is thicker, bigger, heavier, toolier, pricier, and let's be real here, a little bit douchier. It's my watch, I can say it. But it does have a date window, much better lume, a dial that is complex and excellent, and I'm going to be doing a full video comparison for the people who might be on the fence between these two guys here. Ultimately, I did go Planet Ocean, mostly because of the dial on this guy, the lack of date also as well, and I'm glad I did. You know, putting this guy back on always felt like, okay, yeah, that's a little more like it, and with the lume and the details, yeah. I'll freely admit to wishing that the Planet Ocean's dial and movement fit inside the case for this watch, because, oh man, is this thing a chubby bunny here. But you know what, no matter my personal preference, this remains a very, very nice piece. It's a compelling, classy option from Omega. It's dialed back a little bit, relative to a lot of the high-end watches, and it is a very nice watch, which, although it's named as a Master of the Seas, is a perfectly good choice for the Master of a Cubicle as well. So there you go. Hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.